Well, our first session of the day will give you insights on expectations for the future, key trends, challenges, and opportunities for the construction industry. The Voice of the Construction Industry is a research initiative launched by the Big Five with the support of GRS Research and Strategy. Let's welcome our first speaker, who will now deliver the findings of the report, the partner and managing director of GRS Research and Strategy, Mr. Andrea Piccin.
Thank you for the introduction, Laura. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I know it's a very international audience from all over the world, so wherever you are, welcome to this webinar. My name is Andrea Piccin. I am a partner and general manager of GRS Research and Strategy. And what we will be presenting today are the results of the Voice of the Construction Industry Market Outlook. This is a research that GRS Research and Strategy has conducted since 2019 with the support of the Big Five. And the goal of this research is to collect insights about the current status and the expectation for the future for the construction industry. So to get started, just to give you a brief introduction about what this research is about, we have collected insights, as we said, since 2019, interviewing thousands of construction industry professionals from all over the world, from all different aspects of this very large and complex industry. And the latest results, the latest data I'm going to present today are the ones that were collected just a few days ago. We collected data between November 4th and November 14th. So it is very fresh data. And we had more than 3,000 construction industry professionals that participated to this research. In terms of profile of the respondents, as we said, it is a very global research. These are all the countries you see highlighted in this map are the countries that participated to the research. So there is a very strong presence of respondents from the Middle East and Africa and South Asia region, but also from all other parts of the world. So this will allow us to have a very strong benchmarking across different regions of the world. The other element of this survey is that it did really involve all different players of this industry. So we have a very large representation of what has been grouped into service provider, the category of service provider, which includes architecture firms, design firms, engineering firms, consulting firms, and project management firms. And this represents about 30% of our sample. Then we have contractors, and that is another quarter of respondents, 26%. We have manufacturers and technology providers, representing 14% of our data sample. Distributors, another 10%. And then we also have real estate developers and government. And we will see all the results analyzed against all these categories. And the other interesting thing is that you will have access to this information and to this report in the coming days and weeks. Also, when it comes to profiling, it was important for us to understand the seniority and the role of people that were responding to the survey. And almost 50% of respondents are either business owner and senior and C-level professionals, so CEOs, COOs, and so on. Then we have another 25% that are senior manager, 21% that are middle management, and 8% that are other categories. Last, in terms of profiling, is the size of the company. And again, it was important for us to provide a very clear picture of the responses based on the company size. We know it is an element that could affect positively or negatively one performance, or that in any case can have an impact on the decisions that company make. So we have these four groups that are very well represented. So micro businesses, companies that have a turnover of up to $5 million US. Another 24% of respondents that represent work for companies that have a turnover between 5 and 25 million. Medium-sized companies with turnovers up to 100 millions are 13% of our data sample, and another 16% are large corporations, large organizations with a turnover of more than 100 million. So this was for the profiling and a very brief introduction about the research. We now move on to the next slide. And we will start seeing the results from the data that we have collected. And we start with the current situation and trends for the future. The first question we asked to our audience and the respondents is, what are the main challenges that you are facing right now? And as you can see, unstable market, budget, and increasing competition are the top three options that have been selected the most. This was a multiple choice question, so people could have selected up to 3 options. And we see that these are then followed by other options, other challenges. Now, the interesting thing is that if we start analyzing these results based on the nature of the business, we see that the top 3 are not actually the top 3 across the board. It is the case for example, service providers and contractors and real estate developers, where we see that unstable market and budget issues are the top 2. Let's say that unstable market is the number 1, the most critical challenge for all categories except for governments. We have for governments the number 1 being budget. And this is followed by time management and travel restriction. Whereas for manufacturers, for example, travel restriction are the second largest source of concern and the challenge that manufacturers are facing right now. We also asked, what are the key industry trends? Again, we have prefabrication and modular construction and focus on sustainability as being the top 2, followed by e-commerce, increased importance of health and safety, energy and efficiency, renewable energy, and water saving and recycling. But again, what is interesting is that if we look at these results by the type of company, so we will see first this analysis between where we split private and government organizations. So when it comes to private organization, you see that prefabrication and modular construction is at the very first place. And this is actually at the very bottom for government. The most interesting thing we've noticed from this slide is that first, focus on sustainability is relevant for both categories, for both groups. The other thing is that energy efficiency and renewable energy are of very key importance for government. So everything that has to do with sustainability is a very central pillar and focus right now for governments, and they consider it to be a key trend. It's not the same for private organization, where energy efficiency and renewable energy are towards the end, along with water saving and recycling. Also, if we look at these results by nature of business, so we take the private organizations and we divide it into the 5 categories that we saw before: contractors, distributors, manufacturer and technology providers, real estate developers, and service providers. We see that, for example, the focus on sustainability is the number 1 for real estate developers and for service providers. Whereas the number 1 for, and actually also for manufacturer and technology provider, where the other 2 top 3 options are very much aligned with it. You see prefabrication and modular construction, 29%, focus on sustainability mentioned by 31%, and e-commerce mentioned by 30%. When it comes to distributors, though, the number 1 key trends right now is e-commerce. It has been mentioned by 35% of respondents as being the number 1 option. And then we have prefabrication and modular construction, that is the number 1 selection in terms of trend for contractors. And interestingly, we see that real estate developers are also having renewable energy in the top three, and they are the only one to have renewable energy in the top three, as well as service provider that have energy efficiency in the top three. And again, they are the only one to have this in the top three selection for industry trends. Another point that we investigated in this survey, and we asked our respondents, our panel of participants, is which technologies will be impacting the business the most in the next 2 years. Now, what we are providing here, what we are displaying here is the results in 2020, but what you see on the right-hand side is also the results from the survey we conducted at the same time last year, so 1 year ago. And this will allow us to see also the trends that have occurred and the changes that have occurred over the last 12 months. So the one thing, the first thing I would like to highlight is that advanced software are still in the first place. This is confirmed from last year, and it is slightly less relevant in terms of number of people that selected it. So last year it was 31% of people selecting advanced software as a key technology. This year is down to 27%. The other interesting thing is BIM. So BIM is very much aligned with last year. It was 23.8 last year. It is 24% this year. But the interesting thing here is that it has become the number 1 selection, the most common selection for contractors and for service providers. So when you will download the full report, you will see that if you filter for these 2 categories, BIM has become the number 1. Last year, it was number 2. And the last element that I would like to highlight in this slide is AI. Artificial intelligence seems to be having momentum. And last year, it was at the 6th place overall, with 19.1% of people selecting artificial intelligence. This has gone up almost 4 points this year. And the reason why we are highlighting it is not only because it went up a couple positions and 4%, but because it went up across all categories, regardless of whether we're talking about contractors or service providers, manufacturers. For all the categories, the artificial intelligence has become a very has increased compared to last year and is becoming a very relevant technology that everyone is now looking into. Now, the very interesting thing about artificial intelligence is that companies don't seem to be ready to implement this technology. So following the previous question, we asked this second question where we asked, okay, how ready are your employees and your companies to adopt these technologies? So only the people that selected each one of these options and these one technologies were then asked a second question, and they were offered the possibility to say, well, in our company that are professionals that are either fully trained to embrace this technology or sufficiently trained, not trained as yet, or we are not expecting training for our employees. So as you see, for artificial intelligence, only 8% of companies told us that they already have employees within their organization that are fully trained to embrace this technology. There is another 22% that say that there are employees that are sufficiently trained, but still, we combine these two, we end up with only 30% of companies that are claiming to be ready to embrace this technology, and considering the trend it is having and the momentum it is having, I think it's something that as an industry we should look into. Finally, I would like to share with you some insights about the market performance. We asked companies how their companies are doing, how their turnover have been in the past 12 months, and what their expectations are for the future, and what their challenges are, and other information that I will be showing you in the coming slides. So the first one is the question about turnover. And you see the comparison with the data we have collected 1 year ago. In 2019, 60.9% of companies told us that they were expecting their turnover to increase by the end of 2019. So we are a few weeks away from the end of the year. 60.9% of companies 1 year ago were saying we're about to close the year with increasing revenues. And the percentage of companies that were expecting a loss was 13.8%. These numbers have changed dramatically this year, of course, as a result of COVID-19. We have 36% of companies now that are expecting a loss, up from 13%. So it's almost 3 times higher. And we have only 38% of companies that are expecting their turnover to be higher this year than last year. And if we look at these results by all categories we have analyzed, we see that there is really no difference based on any element. We looked at it from a size of the company standpoint. We see that we have around 36 to 40% of companies expecting a loss this year. If we consider companies with a turnover of less than 5 million or above 100 million US dollar, it doesn't change. It's pretty much the same. The same happens when it comes to the nature of business. So we have contractors, distributors, and real estate developers that seem to be the 3 categories with the highest percentage of companies expecting losses. So almost 40% of these companies are expecting losses by the end of this year. And the situation is not really that different for manufacturers, technology providers, and service providers, where we still have about 33 to 35% of companies expecting losses. The last group is by region. We wanted to have a look also if there is any difference there. And again, I think probably because COVID-19 has been a very global pandemic that has affected every single country on earth, we see that even by region, we don't see any relevant difference. Okay, we do have the GCC and the Americas as the top 2 regions with the highest percentage of losses, but it is really higher by a fraction compared to other regions. So these losses are this percentage of losses is across the world, across all different regions. The next slide, this slide I'm showing you right now, is related to when the market will be sustainable for your business again. So we wanted to understand if the market is sustainable as of now, or how long people expect it will take to for the market to be sustainable for their company. And we see that only 13% of respondents say that the current situation is already sustainable for their business. We have an additional 24% that expect this to be the market to be sustainable within 6 months. But then we have the wide majority that think the market will not be sustainable before 12 months or even more than that, even more than 2 years. So what you see, 13.9 is the number of months. So that is, of course, about 1 year and 2 months. That it's the amount of time that we expect on average, that our industry expect on average to be to take in order to have, for our market to be sustainable for our companies. And if we look at this by nature of business, we see that there are some differences. Distributors and manufacturers expect the market to be sustainable in a slightly shorter period of time, around 1 year, whereas it will take 14 to 15 months for contractors, real estate developers, and service providers. The Second last thing I want to share with you are the main challenges per market. So we asked, out of a list of 10 challenges, what are the key challenges in these markets for companies that operate in this market. It could be companies that are based in those markets or that do business in those markets. We see that we have some common patterns here. Travel restrictions have been mentioned by Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and South Africa this year. And for the first four, that happen to be all countries in the GCC, travel restrictions have been a very relevant issue for companies that do business in these markets. The second most mentioned is strong competition that happened to be the first one in the UAE and Egypt, but also very relevant in the GCC. Lack of financial funding is something that affects particularly companies that want to do business in Africa. Cost-driven decision-making, also very relevant and across the board, and also finding new projects is another issue. Now, what's very interesting is that what you will have access to is this analysis by country. I'm going to show you the type of information that you will have access to just for 3 countries. It would take, of course, it would take hours to go through every single individual country. But if we look at the first country, the United Arab Emirates, we have all the information we saw before. So the performance in 2020 compared to 2019, and the expectations that companies have for next year. Now, this is a very interesting one. Of course, we've gone through a very tough year. So we have more than 50% of companies, almost 60% of companies saying that their turnover in this market has shrunk this year. But we have optimism for next year with 40% of companies saying that there will be an increase in terms of turnover. The challenges, as we said, strong competition, collecting payments in the UAE specific for 2020, cost-driven decision-making, and finding new projects are the key challenges. Also, we asked additional information. We asked, for example, what is the key factor that generates these business opportunities? And you see that the economic growth and increase in tourism are the drivers for this growth and for this market in the future. We also move. We also, if you see on the bottom right of this slide, you see also how companies are planning to enter this market. And in this case, it is companies are saying directly with a local branch or establishment, more than via a distributor or through a joint venture or merging and acquisition. We did the same analysis for Egypt. And again, you see that the percentage of companies that recorded a decrease in revenues this year is about 40%. And the percentage of companies that are expecting their turnover to increase next year is almost 50%, is that 16.4% plus 30.3%. And also we asked what you see on the upper left corner, the current market outlook. So we asked, regardless of the performance of your company, what do you think the market is performing in general? Again, challenges, we see strong competition, cost-driven decision-making, and lack of financial funding as the top 3 challenges. And then we move to the last country that we want to present today, which is Saudi Arabia. And again, we see that it's been a challenging year for companies that do business in Saudi Arabia, with about 50% of companies saying they have decreased their revenues in this market in the past 12 months. And again, in this case, we see that we have 49% of companies that are expecting their revenues to increase in 2021. So you see that 18.6 plus 30.4% on the upper right corner. Finally, we see the challenges: strong competition, travel restriction, and cost-driven decision-making being the key challenges right now for the market. And if we were to check why companies are expecting this market, where do they see this market to be interesting? We see that, again, the increase, the economic growth of the market, rebuilding and increase in tourism are the top three, with economic growth being the number one. And again, companies that plan to do business in Saudi Arabia and enter the market are planning to enter the market primarily directly with a local branch or establishment, followed by distributors with about 30% of respondents. So this is it. I know it's a lot of information in very few minutes, but I'll be very happy to respond to your questions. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will wait for your questions. Thanks a lot.
Well, a huge thank you there to Andrea Piccin for bringing us up to date and for sharing and delivering those fascinating insights from the Voice of the Construction Industry report. And thank you so much to Andrea for staying online with us to answer our attendee questions. So thanks so much for staying with us.
Thank you, Laura.
We had quite a few questions come in, of course. Very interesting to see, of course, what the main challenges are per market, especially with travel restrictions, especially. So the first question that's come in actually is, why was there so much emphasis within your presentation on artificial intelligence? I think one of the figures was only that 8% of companies have said that they have employees that are trained in tech. Yeah, tell us why there was so much emphasis on AI.
Well, if we look at the information that we have collected, it was the one technology that was really growing in terms of importance. And as we mentioned, we have a year-on-year comparison. We started this this research project 1 year ago. And over the last 12 months, this is the one technology that really has increased across all different type of companies. And that is one reason why we wanted to stress this in particular. And as you mentioned, the fact that it seems that it is increasing in terms of importance, but it still is the one where the companies are less ready to adopt this technology. So we only have 8% of people, 80% of companies that claim they have professionals fully trained to adopt this technology, and an additional 20% that have some sort of training. So 70% of companies are just, of those that think this technology will be relevant, 70% of them are not ready to implement it. So I think it's something very, very important to look into.
I'm sure we're going to see that rise over the years, aren't we? Of course. So next question, is there any key analysis for the wider Africa market and also South Asia to come out of the report?
Yes, there is. There is plenty, actually. With the time that we had available, we needed to make a selection of the information available that came up from this report. What you've seen, for example, in the last few slides of the presentation, the focus that we've had on the UAE, on Saudi Arabia, and on Egypt is available also for many other countries. We have this information available for Nigeria. We have this information available for Kenya. We have this information available for other countries in Africa. So there is more and more information in the full report. And I think, yes, well, I don't think we have enough time right now to go country by country. It's very specific, but I can tell you, if you are interested, for example, in one of the countries I've mentioned, you will find more detailed information about these countries.
Good to know. Thank you so much. A lot of people have also asked, how do we access this report?
Okay, so this report, the full report will be sent to all registered attendees. So if you're here with us now, you are going to receive the full report.
Very good to know as well. That's all of our registered attendees. Brilliant. So our next question is, which top countries adopted prefab and modular construction?
Okay, so very specific question. I don't have it here with me right now. The fact is we have closed this data collection 10 days ago. So it's actually quite interesting, very detailed. We can look into this information. Let me figure out a way to process this information and make sure it reaches you.
No problem, thank you. And is there anything else that has affected the performance of businesses this year, and what do you think is going to affect them in the future?
All right. What has affected the performance this year? For sure, it's been a very particular year, and travel restrictions have been an issue. I think the most relevant thing that emerged from the analysis that we've done, and it's something that you will have access to from the full report. We did not include it in the presentation, in this 30-minute presentation today, but we are going to provide you will have access to the information of how companies are performing, depending on whether they are headquartered in the country or they are international companies operating in that market. And that has made a big difference. That's where we see big differences. We have markets in which international companies have performed better than local companies in 2020, or let's say relatively better, considering it's been a very challenging year regardless. And I think that has been a key factor. At the same time, in other countries, local companies have performed much better. So it's not the same. It's not the same across the board. I can tell you that, for example, in the GCC, I local companies perform better than international ones. Local companies perform better than international ones. It is the same, for example, in Egypt. If we look at countries like Kenya or Nigeria, in these countries emerged that local companies were suffering even more than international ones. So it's not the same across the board, and that's why I think it's very important to have a look at the full report, because it allows you to access information country by country, and it is much more specific than we could have been in the last 30 minutes.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for keeping us up to speed. Very kind of you. Just to wrap up, what would you say are your key highlights from the report? What would you like our audience to go away with?
All right. I think of course, the economic performance is no surprise. We all know how challenging it's been, how challenging 2020 has been. But the optimism that we see for 2021 in terms of market performance and expectation for turnover compared to 2020, of course, we are comparing a turnover next year with whatever turnover we're going to end 2020 with. So it could be, depending on the companies, a partial recovery or a full recovery. But at least we have a feeling that the worst is behind, and that 2021 looks slightly better. It's interesting to see which markets are more appealing for companies and where companies see more opportunities moving forward. It's interesting to see how in certain markets companies are considering entering directly with a local branch of establishment, and in which other countries companies are looking and focusing their intentions to invest, to find local distributors or to enter via a joint venture. And I think the technology and the technology information, big trends. And again, you will have access to the information across all different sectors. So if you are a manufacturer, if you are a contractor, distributor, you will have access to this more detailed information. And in this case, particularly, the trends and see how much this has evolved and how this has evolved over the last 12 months. I think is the key element of interest for this research.
Well, very good to know that the work is behind us. Thank you so much once again for sharing that very detailed report, very fascinating, from Andrea, Piccin. Thank you for kickstarting day 4 for us as well with a very insightful keynote on expectations, trends, challenges, and opportunities within the industry, and an array of topics we will be continuing throughout the day. Thank you so much once again to Andrea, Piccin. Thank you.